Welcome to another show of the Research to Reps Roundtable. I'm your co-host, Dr. Coach Pat Ivy, and with me is Dr. Ted Lambrinides. Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing great today, Pat. Looking forward to our guest today.
I am too. And we also have Dr. Ernie Reimer. How's it going?
I'm doing just swell, Dr. Ivy. Thanks for asking. When I was driving to work today, I was just thinking about how lucky I am to show up to work every single day and to be around people who are truly experts in their given fields. And it's a true honor and privilege to introduce you to the one and only Dr. Katie Nichols. How are you today, Katie?
I am great. It is a beautiful day here, and so I can't complain.
And you never complain. I mean, you are the director of mental performance, and the director of mental performance would never complain because you are the most mentally tough person because it's in your title, right? And in the entire athletics department, you have to be.
Full transparency, I do like to be vulnerable with athletes and tell them that, hey, just because I teach this stuff doesn't mean that I don't have to remind myself these things too. But definitely coming today with extra gratitude. I'm excited to be here. Thank y'all for having me on.
That's awesome. I'll go ahead and kick it off and throw you up a softball question. What is mental performance?
I think if you ask a lot of people that question, you might get a whole different slew of answers there, just similar to mental toughness. But I would say, as human beings, we are asked to perform in a lot of different ways, whether that be in our jobs, whether that be in sport, whether that be in everyday life. And, maybe it's performing for a podcast or performing a presentation for work, right? All different arenas that you can really be performing in. And so the mental part of that is, how do I put myself in the position to be successful and not allow some of those mental obstacles like doubt or fear or comparison or some of those different areas to really get in the way. So it's really being able to hone in on the mental skills that help you be able to perform at your best in whatever arena that may be.
Awesome. Probably easier said than done, I'm guessing.
Definitely. I would be interested, especially just knowing that the three of you have all been in different arenas over time, how each of y'all have seen mental performance show up in your own roles.
Sounds like Ted. You sound like you want to take the first crack at that one, Ted.
Well, this particular time of year with the NFL draft coming up next week, a lot of times you get questions from different teams on, wanting to know what aspect would be most important for different position groups. And, obviously, mental resiliency, cognitive processing, all things that come up, especially when you're looking at the quarterback position. So, to get a gauge on somebody's, say, mental performance, I think you have to sort of dig deep, do a lot more research, and talking to the coaches, the teammates, the parents, of that particular athlete. And sometimes that just gives you more clues, and those clues are the information that we would provide you. Yep. And then you can relay that to the coaches in probably a more concise fashion. And I think that discussion is becoming more commonplace in professional sports, during draft time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take the next crack at that. Mental performance. It is having a set of skills, mental skills, and being able to use those skills. So you can say it's thinking right in sport, but there are also team dynamics and external factors and people's perceptions. And there's a lot that goes into it. Mental health at some point intersects with mental performance. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, which is why I think is very timely to talk about this right now on this podcast, Research to Reps Roundtable, especially when we have a director of sports science. And I would think that research is a foundation of sports science. And why not ask the sport scientist? So what do you think, Ernie?
Well, when I heard Katie's answer earlier, she talked about how mental performance involves honing in on the mental skills required to perform your job at a high level. And so when Katie asked the question, I centered that around the idea of me showing up to work every day, and how do I bring a set of mental skills to perform at a high level. And I would say that as a sports scientist, one who is constantly trying to facilitate education and translating research into actual practice, it takes a lot of perseverance and grit, because as opposed to maybe a strength conditioning coach, I really do have control of the training X's and O's, and I can kind of let that be my guide. In my role, I am in a position to have to continually persevere past the preconceived notions and biases of the audience that I'm serving. And so they have all these experiences behind them in different sets of education, and we're trying to improve athlete health and performance. But most of the time, there will be resistance to introducing some new ideas. So it takes a lot of perseverance and grit and patience to be able to go through that. And earlier, at the beginning of the conversation, Katie, when it comes to mental performance, you said you have no complaints. And, I wonder, like, how much better can we perform if we show up each day and we can eliminate the negativity or the complaining, and we can focus on the positive aspects of our role as an athlete, positive aspects of our role as professionals?
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. I think that's where a lot of my personal approach and philosophy, and even just a lot of the intersectionality between mental performance and positive psychology exists, is that piece of not necessarily pushing away or ignoring that there is some things out there that happen to us that are obviously not ideal. But I think at the end of the day, there's real research and science behind gratitude and appreciating the things that go well. And the more that we do that, the more those emotions start to find their way into our normal everyday neural pathways. And so ultimately we're able to then look for, or as they say in military terms, hunt the good, right? Instead of always relying on something's going to go wrong, or why does this always happen to me? And then I'm just automatically putting myself in a negative headspace.
Now, if you're in it was a John Gordon's book, they would talk about energy vampires.
Right. Yep.
How do you deal if let's just say somebody's been identified as an energy vampire? And I've been to different teams where they vote on the energy vampire of the week. How do you try to transform somebody from an energy vampire?
I think that at the end of the day, finding or hunting the good things is a skill in itself. And so I talk about how normal it is that we are wired for negativity, to find some of those negative aspects because it's a way that we survive. And while our brains don't know the difference anymore between a wildebeest is coming at me and I've got a whole slew of people in front of me and I just made a mistake on the field, at the end of the day, it's still a skill and requires reps. But if we find the positives, if we find the things, even in the moments where maybe we did experience failure, if we find what we learned from that, right, we're starting to rewire our brains in order to be more positive and find the good things and not just focus solely on it's negative and it's always going to be negative, and I'm going to bring the whole team with me.
I have a question for you.
Yes,
You
sir.
just said something. You said hunting the good,
Yes.
and that is so. That is interesting. I know you can talk about that later. I'm sure we can talk about that one later. But the question that I had a coach tell me once that there was no science for the head and the heart, and this is after I had a PhD. Um, so what you're talking about is not just some made up, feel good, light some incense. It's so easy, relax,
Right.
take a deep breath. Life's easy. No, what you're talking about is hard, it's hardcore. There
Mm-hmm.
is science that backs it up.
Yep.
Can you talk about some of the science that backs up mental performance?
Yeah. So I think, what we're talking about with hunting the good and a lot of the research around a regular gratitude practice and how that impacts our overall ability to be optimistic. Optimism is closely linked to resilience. And so when we have coaches out there telling us that we want athletes to be more resilient, the only way to do that is to build optimism and hope. So while it may seem very fluffy and pie in the sky to hunt the good things and find what went well, at the end of the day, if I don't have any hope and I don't feel like there's a way through this, right? Because the ultimate definition of hope is not only understanding that I have a place that I believe I can get to, but I have a pathway to do it. And so that means in itself that things are going to be hard, but I have to keep some of that perspective and find the positives, find ways to be grateful in some of those difficult moments in order to be resilient and be mentally tough, be gritty. So I think that's where a lot of that intersection between positive psychology, what people do to flourish, what they do in order to be at their best, what they do differently, and how that connects to the elite athlete and ultimately how they're able to perform at their best, even in really challenging situations. But I think that piece too, I think like you're saying, it's very hard to do, and that's the whole point, right? When someone is really truly a energy vampire, so to speak, right? They have really wired themselves into a place of negativity. And so it's not going to be easy sometimes to find the positives, but finding 3 things that went well for 21 days has actual scientific evidence to show increase in positive emotions, increase in optimism. And by doing that, right, we're building grit, but we're also building new pathways in our brains that help us find the good things instead of always just thinking, oh, I suck, right? What are y'all's thoughts when you hear the idea of, kind of Pat, what you were talking about, that piece of there's no place for gratitude and, positive emotions. There's no place for that in sport. What's kind of y'all's experience with that?
I've heard that from coaches. I've had a coach say it to my face. Sounds like a bunch of psychobabble to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And which is insulting and for many different reasons. The fact that I'm taking classes in this and spending a lot of my time sacrificing to help everyone on the team, that's insulting on many different levels. But it is valuable feedback because there is skepticism out there with people that don't understand the mental side of the game, who think that you can actually just run many more sprints and eventually you will find mental toughness on the other side of those sprints.
Right.
I'll stop there.
Ted, what about you?
No, I think the better coaches I've been around, say in the last 10 years, have have bought into exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Because I think they understand that improves buy-in and communication, and rationally it makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think finding enjoyment and fun are, I think, important factors. And when you see teams that have embraced that, and was it the San Francisco, the Golden State Warriors, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the underlying themes of their coach's philosophy.
Right.
And it doesn't hurt to have superstar players, but I think you can achieve great success as a unit by embracing a lot of those principles.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie, how about in the world of baseball?
Baseball is awesome. I have a lot of gratitude to still be able to play men's baseball at my age. That's one thing I can say. It's a ton of fun. To be completely honest, I've been lucky enough to have worked with mental performance coaches, so sports psychologists, and mental health professionals through, including this one, my last 3 jobs. So I've been working with mental performance and mental health professionals for more than a decade now, and having both types of professionals present has probably maybe shielded me from this attitude that you can't show gratitude in your setting and your performance setting. So I feel like I've been a little bit shielded from that, maybe just because I've been around amazing professionals like yourself. One thing you talked about, though, was this idea of optimism and hope have to be constructed in order to create resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Something we've talked about a lot of the times in like the high performance setting is this idea that hope is not a method. But when I hear you talk, hope sounds like it might be a method. So, and where they come from when they say hope is not a method, it's that you're not strategically planning for success to create success, that you just are showing up and kind of just showing up and going about your business and hoping that we will be successful. But talk to me a little about hope, building hope as a method.
Yeah, and maybe that's where there's a differentiator between layman's terms hope and how hope is defined in the research of positive psychology. But there really is this idea of not only a belief that I can accomplish and that there is good on the other side and that this may be a long path, but I can eventually get there. There's that belief. And there's equally an idea of how do I get there? And so sometimes we talk about goal setting. The way that I like to talk about it is more goal committing, because anybody can set goals. It's more, how do I break down the ultimate long-term goal into the process? And that's where hope lives, right? I can set this goal. I can believe that I can accomplish this goal, but then I can break it down into a daily, weekly process to help me know what is that going to require of me in order to get to it. It doesn't mean that I just cross my fingers and like you said, show up and just pray that it happens, right? At the end of the day, I have to do the work. I have to do the steps, but that hope comes from setting that process.
Katie, I have a question.
Yes,
What is
sir.
the difference between a mental health therapist and a mental performance specialist? Because you are on a staff that has both, and even the difference between a psychiatrist. What is the difference between those professions?
Yep. So starting with psychiatrist has been to med school. They are ones that have been through the medical MD process and have specialized in psychiatry and can diagnose and prescribe medication. On the clinical counseling, mental health side, those are the individuals that have a background, licensure, training in clinical counseling, mental health. And ultimately, the way that I describe it to a lot of people in sport, the mental health person is kind of like your athletic trainer, right? There's a certain illness, something that's impacting my ability to function normally. And so that person is helping bring me up to normal functioning. What that looks like for each individual is a little bit different. The mental performance side is kind of like the strength coach, right? It's taking someone who may be functioning rather normally, but wants to get a little bit better. And so there's some things that from the field of performance psychology, from positive psychology, from all these different avenues that we can really look at what are the outliers doing differently and how do we utilize some of those skills in order to really capitalize and make sure that I'm really making the most of my time out there. I'm not getting in my own way in the process.
How do you help coaches, athletes, administrators to know the difference? And why is it important to know the difference?
Definitely important to know the difference, because someone like myself is not going to be the person talking about talking with individuals that are experiencing mental health concerns, right? Whether that's depression, anxiety, grief, loss, different stressors, trauma. Obviously, there's a really important place for that. And I think the stats currently say 1 in 4 college students experiences some type of mental health concern or issue. And so knowing that our student athletes and our staff members are living with some of those mental health concerns, right? There's an importance to have those individuals that specialize in that to help you be able to take some of the extreme stresses of life that are preventing us from normal functioning. At the same time, right, there's also equally the ways that we all get in our own way and sometimes get in our own heads, whether that be with comparison, with doubt, with internal, external pressures, some of those elements that are all outside of our control, and being able to focus and find the things that are in our control in order to really be able to perform at our best, regardless of whether that's in our everyday job as an administrator. You know, I used to, in my former job, work with corporate clients, global 500 companies that would experience the same type of pressures in leadership, right? At the end of the day, whether it's in the corporate space where there's maybe a number, a dollar sign, or there's a scoreboard, right? There's always some type of outcome external to us that can sometimes get in the way of us performing at our best. And so I think whether we're the performers in the professional sense or the performers on the field, court, pool, mat, wherever we may be, both exist. And so there's definite need and ability to utilize both. I think it works as a partnership for sure. So,
Katie, what advice do you give to athletes if they're going to go into a competition? And if you look at who the opponent might be, where they may be exposed to a lot of trash talk, you know, what are some strategies you've given to athletes to help to deal with that?
well, you know, I'm a firm believer that every individual is a little different. And so while there are some foundational skills in mental performance, I think the way in which each person goes about them is going to look a little bit individual to the person. But hopefully at that point, we've talked about some of the core values and beliefs and strengths that exist within that individual. And that way they're able to show up and be the best version of themselves. And so sometimes knowing what are my strengths, what are my values, that ultimately helps me know, regardless of how other people are coming at me, how do I want to show up in those moments? Because we all know that trash talking exists in both men's and women's sports. And so can I stand my ground and be the person that I ultimately want to be in those moments? Because that's really when values are most important, right? It's easy to uphold my values when things are going good, but when I get challenged, that's ultimately when it gets tested. I would be interested to know too, just because values research is something that I have spent a lot of time on, but how do y'all feel like your core values show up in some of those challenging moments for you? Or maybe what's a value that you feel like you lean on most in your role? I've
Come
been
on, Ernie.
instructed to make Ernie go first, so.
No problem. So I think that like in my role, some core values that are really important to me are teamwork and collaboration. And so sometimes, like if there's trash talk and it's in the professional environment, usually you know that if you're pretty tight and you're working with your team, there's a little bit of banter. That's that's well received, I gotta say. And because Dr. Ivy makes fun of me, the sports scientist, all the time for my constant technical difficulties with devices and technology. It is what it is. I know we're a team and we're collaborating, trying to get better. But sometimes that trash talking can affect you when it might be more negative and professional, like pointing fingers and kind of attacking other areas for various reasons. And I think that usually in those situations, I'm going to try to understand why that happened, and then how can we move forward in a way that will allow us to be a team and to collaborate for a benefit that is greater than ourselves. Because ultimately we're service providers, and sometimes in the workplace, one of the number one things that holds back our ability to provide a better product to teams, coaches, athletes, other staff is really just the fact that the staff don't work as a team and they're not collaborating. So for me, it's always a journey of trying to move towards greater teamwork and collaboration. And quite frankly, if that's not possible, then it's then form your teams and surround yourself with the people who do really want to work as a team and to collaborate for a better product.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, how about you?
I'm not really exposed to a lot of trash talking in my role. I see a lot of it. When I go to, particularly in the NFL during training camp, when they have these joint practices, the amount of trash talking is unbelievable. And it usually escalates into a physical conflict. Mm-hmm. And so I think at that point in time, when it escalates to that, I don't think anybody's thinking about their core values. I mean, it's just knee-jerk reaction. So, the degree of the creativity of some of the trash talk, I would say that it is quite impressive. How about you, Pat?
Well, I think we got a couple things going on here. We're talking about the trash talking. So, what's the purpose of trash talking? It is to gain an advantage over your opponent. And for those that talk trash, they're usually pretty good at it. They've done it for a while. It isn't something they woke up one day and it's like, I've been involved in my sport for 10 or 20 years and I've never done any trash talking. I think I'm going to try it today. No, you probably can go back in Little League and they were talking trash, high school, same thing. And it's become what they feel is a part of their game. And they've probably have learned to somewhat become a master of it because they've been able to impact their opponent so that they gain an advantage in the competition. Now, I think there are clever ways, and I actually like the clever trash talk. The Kobe Bryant style of trash talking to me brings a certain level of intelligence and makes you it can be subtle, but it's like planning something that just takes over your brain. And so for me, there's a way, and then there's what I think some people don't put much thought into the trash talk. And for me, I don't like that part. I don't like the simple-minded trash talk. But if it's got some complexity to it, and and it's clever, and it's done in a way that not necessarily bring so much attention to you that it takes away from the attention of your team. I think, there are certain times when I go, wow, that was impressive. Now, values, going back to values, like Ernie said, I'm a big team person, hard work, collaboration. I think it's important to share, be able to communicate as well, and that's something that it seemed like, for me, communication is something I'm always chasing, and I don't think it's anything I'll ever capture, but it's the pursuit of it that I think is a strong value for me. So I'll say, what about, let me ask Dr. Reimer a question really quick here. Baseball and trash talking. Do you do any of that, or have you seen any of that? What's your experience with trash talking in baseball?
I'm really good at it. Yeah, I'm really good at it. I'm crafty though, because I play catcher, and catchers are known for their craft. And I won't name names, but I've been playing men's baseball for a long time, and every single team, as you start to play the same teams over and over again, and you know who on those teams have never had a men's performance coach, and there's always a moment in a game. Now, what I'll say is, ethically, I never start it. I'm never gonna start it. But there's always a moment in a game when those individuals, like on the lug nuts, it'll be TP. I'm using initials, so I don't use actual names. And on the Vipers, it'll be DC. And I'm not gonna say their real names, but there's always just a moment where the umpire makes a bad call, and then they start yapping and yelling at an umpire. Something will happen, and then their fuse will ignite. And that's when I go to work. And usually if I could get them to self-destruct, there's no doubt that, like, they'll get ejected, something will happen, it will hurt the other team, and we'll win almost every single time. So it works. It can work. And it's all fun and games, and it's just light amateur adult baseball fun, but there is a method to trash talking and trying to get inside the head of the opponent. And that would bring up my next question for Dr. Pat and Dr. Katie. Sometimes a little bit of trash talking can actually kind of improve the performance of the person who is receiving the trash talking, right? So there could be a risk in it. At what point does your response to trash talking really start to degrade, like go past that, like increase maybe physical motivation and that hustle and that drive that they have to try to prove that trash talking wrong? And at what point does that kind of take you to a point where you're maybe lacking control or lacking focus?
The first thing that I thought of, for those that haven't seen the Last Dance documentary, is just how much Michael Jordan would utilize even non-existent trash talk to fuel him and motivate him. Like, he would create scenarios in his mind that didn't even happen, to utilize that as a way, extra motivator to get after someone in particular on the court. And so, I think it definitely depends on the person, because there's the people that are going to take trash talk and let it impact them in a negative way. But I say let it intentionally, because ultimately it is a choice how we perceive it. And, whether it's basketball or whether you're standing across the net from someone in tennis and you see them talking, it's all about, how do I choose to perceive that trash talk? Are they trying to talk trash because they're not confident, and so they're trying to do anything they can? Or are they talking trash because there's something that I'm now doubting in myself, and I'm letting that impact me? But like you said, not everyone has worked on their mental skills in order to not only be aware of how the trash talk impacts them, but also how to do something different if it's impacting them negatively.
I agree with that. And Katie, you and I have a very similar background in terms of where we learned some of the mental performance, the science of it, the practical application of it.
Mhm.
And we know that you can't make us think. Like, we can't make others think. We're trying to have influence on what people are thinking, but you are actually ultimately in control. All of us are in control of our own thoughts.
Yep.
And if you don't know that, you might think that other people can make you think something.
Mhm.
You don't realize that you actually have control, or you've never been told that. You've never been given any I would say exercises on how to develop that skill of thinking right. You know, if you have a negative thought, all you have to do is replace it with a positive thought. There are people, if you've never been taught that, then you don't know. If you don't understand the 5 skills of focus, and you've never practiced those skills, then when someone is trying to trash talk, then you don't have the skills to combat it. So you may trash talk back, trying to meet them where they're at, and then but that's their game. I think one of my favorite moments is being on the sidelines as a coach and having taught these skills to our players. I knew that our players had something that the opponents didn't, and I would actually um, trash talk in a different way. I would tell the opponent that the player on our team wasn't that good, and there's no way you should be able to not contain him, because he's not very fast, he's not explosive, mentally weak, and I would get the attention of the opponent, and then but our player would know, oh, they would know what's going on here. That was always fun, because it wasn't a demeaning way of demeaning the opponent. It was actually using some sort of reversal, and just to give, if I could, if I could get their attention, then there's a possibility that they were it was a distraction, and then maybe that would take away from their concentration.
Mhm.
So for me, there's some fun in it as well. So it's not always about something that is just demonstrative or demeaning. Sometimes it's just good fun. So that's just my perspective on trash talking.
Now, Katie, let's just say later this spring or summer, you get a call from Ernie, and he's in a slump. You know, he hasn't really performed his last 15 at bats well. What advice do you give to an athlete that's experiencing a slump?
I think
Not going to happen, Ted, just for the record.
I think the thing that I like to tell every athlete is that what works for one isn't going to work for others. But a big part of my job is helping you be more aware of you, right? Helping you be more aware of not only what works for you, but what doesn't work for you. And so sometimes I have to go through some of those slumps in order to know what was going on that was different than when things were going well. I have to have some data for both and be able to compare the two to know what the differences were. And so slumps, I always say slumps are not bad. They're just information. And so if I can look at it objectively, both wins and losses, if I can look at it objectively and see what information I can gain from it, then that helps me know not only what's working, but how do I replicate it and make it work again? So Ernie, I'll be there for you for the slumps, just in case.
Thanks. It's good that I got someone I can turn to for that.
And that's good, because Ernie, you know where to turn. But I'll ask Dr. Nichols, where does someone else turn to who may not know you? And you don't want, you can't have 100 people reaching out to you for some mental performance coaching. For the mom or dad, the parent, the coach, the counselor, the athlete
Mhm.
that may be listening or watching this podcast, and they are thinking, wow, I would really like to get in touch with Katie Nichols or someone like her. What do they do? Where do they go? How can they make a connection with someone that can help them regarding mental performance?
That's a really good question. I think ASP is a great website to get actual referrals of names, but I think even more so, there's just so many really good books and resources out there too. Podcasts like this, even audiobooks. And ultimately, I think what we were talking about with the reflection and the self-awareness is really that first part. Something that doesn't require someone to sit down with me or anyone else for that matter, but just an easy way that, I talk about, yes, we talk a lot about the pregame routine, but equally and probably missed more than it's done is the postgame routine. And so that part of evaluating my performances so that one, I can get the information I need, but two, I can also, metaphorically turn the page on it too. And so a really easy way to kind of go through, I will self-disclose that I am not a diary entry type of person. I know that writing is really good for you, reflecting, journaling, and for those that is their forte, like more power to you. I think for me, I wanted to create some type of easy bullet point type of evaluation of performances that athletes could go through. And in order to make it easy, you make it an acronym, right? So I call it a HOPS log. And so for those that don't really like to go through a lot of Dear Diary type of entries, you can literally put HOPS in your phone on a notes and go through. But the H is the highlights. So highlighting what went well. And even more importantly, asking myself, why did it go well? Because that's really where you get a lot of the good meat of the information. Yeah, it's great you know, if someone's first serve was going really well, but if that's all I know about it and I don't know why it was going well, maybe I had just put in an extra drill or I just put in some type of extra 30 minutes a day. That gives me that information to know that that's something that helps me prepare for it. So the H is the highlights. What went well? Why did it go well? The O is the obstacles, right? Like what didn't go well? What did I struggle with? And again, the why is the important part because it's not about things went good or bad. It's about what information can I get from it. So if I was struggling, why was I struggling? Was it something mentally? Was it something technically? Was it something totally outside of my control? And maybe it just happened to be the environment that day. I talk about that with golfers a lot too, right? Like sometimes it's just golf. Sometimes I had a great swing, great shot, and it just went into a divot. Like that's just golf. So again, the why. And then the P is the purpose. So given the fact that I've now gone through and gotten information from what went well and what didn't, what did I learn from it? What was the purpose of going through that? What can I take away now? And then the last part is S, which is strategy. And again, I'm all about putting awareness into action. So now that I have learned something from this, what can I do differently? What's the game plan? Maybe I've learned something that I want to work on more. So that's my HOPS log for you.
Thank you. And you mentioned ASP, which is AASP. So that's the Association of Applied Sports Psychology.
Yes.
So
yeah.
if someone is trying to search for that, you can type in AASP, and that's the appliedsportspsych.org website.
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
Yep.
I have a question, and this will actually, it's for all three of you, being at the same university. If let's just say that you go to watch one of your teams play, and you just see some really bad behavior out of a particular athlete that's not consistent with what you expect. what's the chain of command in terms of, if let's just say, if the head coach doesn't take care of, maybe correcting that behavior, what's the chain of command in terms of trying to get that solved or brought to the appropriate attention?
I think the thing that you'll hear out of Ernie, Pat, and myself is the idea of comprehensive integration and collaboration, right? I think collaboration is on all three of our short lists of values. And the reason there is that, like, on every given team with every given athlete, there may be someone different that they're closest to, whether that's a coach, whether that's the strength coach, the trainer, myself, or another mental performance person. Maybe it's a teammate or an academic coordinator. And so to be able to have those conversations with that right person that knows that person well and say, hey, I just saw something out of this person that just seemed a little out of character. And maybe if I have enough of a relationship with that athlete already, I'll reach out to them and say, hey, you just seemed a little off today. What's going on? But I think whoever that person may be, right, making sure that they're touching base with them, seeing if something's going wrong, if maybe something's going on in their personal life, and we want to direct them then to mental health resources, right? But just, I would say having the person that knows them best be the one to have the initial conversation, and then being able to identify what's the real issue and who's the right resource then. I don't know, Pat, Ernie, y'all's thoughts?
I don't have any more than that, honestly, because that to me is it's all about teamwork. It's all about the people that are around that athlete or those athletes, and them working together and communicating with one another and collaborating. So to me, that's the answer, and that's what I think we're all trying to work towards and to achieve. Ernie, what do you think?
Well, a lot of ideas coming through my mind here, and I fully agree, Katie. But when you first said hop slog, what I heard was two words, was hop and slog. And so I looked up the definition for the word slog, and the word is to work hard and steadily. That's a definition. It's hard, persistent work. And we're surrounded by doctors, doctor. And so we're all sloggers, right? Because it takes a lot of hard and persistent work to finish the dissertation. Now, one question I wanted to ask is, in the sports science of mental performance, what is late breaking and what's emerging in the field? But I think you already said it, and it's this idea of comprehensive integration. And I believe that when you were slogging your way through your dissertation, you studied comprehensive integration. So would you briefly share with all of us, what is comprehensive integration with more detail?
Sure. Yeah. To consolidate over 250 pages into a short answer here, my research basically looked at a comprehensive integrated sports psychology program. And there was at that point no research from a 360 perspective, right? We had gotten the experience of the athletes with sports psychology from the athletes, from the coaches, from the athletic trainers, from sports. I think academics was an area, but no study had looked at it from a 360 view. And so the idea there that there was sports psychology delivery services integrated on each of the teams gave me a unique opportunity to look at what that experience was from the head coach, from support staff members, from the athletic, or from the student athlete, and from the mental performance coach themselves. And my research was primarily founded in some theories within values. So a lot of it looked at how do values impact the delivery in those holistic integrated sports psychology programs. And I think there was a lot that was found there, but part of it was that each role plays an important part. The head coach doesn't also want to be the one wearing all of the hats. Ideally, if there is someone with those expertise, they want to be able to lean on and trust that that person can play that role, and they can take that then off of their plate and just coach in an ideal world. I think the other part that the athlete appreciates it in that they can go and have a space that they can talk about some of these things with someone who plays no part in playing time, right? That was another piece of it. And even just from a support staff standpoint, I think having a mental performance coach integrated on support staff teams helped them maintain healthy perspective so that they were able to show up and be at their best for their given role and really be at their best for the student athletes. I know we talk a lot in our field about taking care of ourselves before we take care of others, the idea of the oxygen mask on the airplane, right? And so I have to put my own mask on first. And sometimes, the student athletes are the ones that get that resource first, but by having that integrated person within sports psychology there on staff, they're able to, in a lot of ways, be the mental performance coach for the support staff too. Because they have long, hard days and it's easy to get into a servant mindset and sometimes forget to take care of ourselves too. So to be able to have that sounding board and maintain some healthy perspective there. But then that piece, like we were just talking about before, of just identifying like who's the right resource for this particular issue going on, and be able to direct them accordingly so that it doesn't have to all come down on one person. Does that answer your question?
More than answered it. That's awesome.
I'm left speechless.
That was technically a question. Does that answer it, right?
I think so. I'm thinking a lot of things right now because there are people that don't have sports psychologists at all,
Mm-hmm.
let alone integrated into a health and performance team. We're still at the point where we're trying to help others to understand the importance of even having one as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice or what can you give someone who is trying to get to the point where they have someone like you on their staff? Like where do they need to research? Who do they need to talk to? What kind of plan do they need to put together so that they can start to make some progress?
Mm-hmm. I think the benefit of having someone fully dedicated on the mental performance side is that you end up in a lot of situations identifying things early. And so if we're trying to be a proactive program, sometimes having that person already in the room, watching practices at lift or at different events, things like that, you're able to sometimes catch things before they become mountains, right? Catch them when they're still molehills. And so, I think that's always like one benefit to being able to argue for the idea of having someone full-time in mental performance is that we're able to create some proactive support and resources. And ultimately, coaches want to perform, coaches want to win, right? And that's really what we're there for, is to help people be able to bring out their best when it matters. And so it becomes an added edge. If you're a program, I know there's a lot of programs that don't have the budget for it, right? But I think there's so many really good podcasts out there. Honestly, I'm a big advocate for a lot of different podcasts. and all kinds of books out there too, whether they're books on habits or they're books specifically on specific mental skills. If I have to kind of be the coach that wears multiple hats, that's one way to integrate it into what I'm doing. Like, just because we were talking baseball, Heads Up Baseball is a great book to be able to integrate. The Inner Game of Tennis is also an amazing resource as well. Mind Gym, all kinds of books out there. Legacy, one of my all-time favorites, talking about the All Blacks from New Zealand. So there's so many really good resources where you don't have to formally have someone there if that's just not something that's possible, right? But I think at the end of the day, we're seeing a trend in that direction because those that do have it can see that it's something that's working and it's something that's creating preventative models, right? Instead of being reactive.
I love that. And you said at the end of the day, and we're getting to the end of the day, and usually we wrap up with a question from Dr. Ted, but I just have one more question for you, because we're talking about where people can go for resources when they don't have a mental performance coach. So at the end of the day, what's one thing that coaches, parents, support staff, anyone who mentors, interacts, and supports athletes on a daily basis, what's one thing they can do at work tomorrow to support the mental performance of their athletes when they don't have a mental performance coach?
I think the thing that came to mind first is being able to focus on the right things. And that's for both your student athletes and for yourself. So even if I have to map out what are the things that are controllable, what are the things that are uncontrollable, even though I'm pretty sure uncontrollable is not a word, but I use it all the time. But what's controllable, what's uncontrollable, list those things out. Because a lot of times instinctively we know it, but when we see it written out and right in front of our face, we see how much of my energy and attention is being spent on the other side of the line that's not in my control, right? And so the more that I can practice that as a coach, we think about all the pressures, right? All the things that, well, we have to win because my job depends on it and all these things. Well, you're stepping into the same experience that the student athletes are feeling of, well, I have to perform in order to keep my spot. And so we're all practicing the same skills. It's just presenting itself a little bit differently. So I would say that really is the heart of focus, right? We can focus, but we could be focused on the wrong things a lot of times. And so if I can learn to focus on what's in my control, we're already ahead of the game.
Nice. So what you're saying is that, like, the theme song of the movie Frozen 2, I have small children, like, they're on to something, because the theme song is about focusing on the next right thing. So I like that.
I had a coach once tell me she would tell her athletes NBA. She would yell NBA all the time, and it meant next best action. Like, regardless of what just happened, what's the next best action?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Frozen 2 apparently is ahead of the game too.
Gotta watch it. It's good flick.
Yeah. Now, Katie, we always finish up by asking what books would you recommend for some of our listeners? You've already recommended 3 excellent books.
I did.
So you got to my question before I could even ask it, but any additional ones besides the ones you already mentioned?
Besides the ones I mentioned, Mindset was a book that I read in my positive psychology class in graduate school that definitely helped me realize, man, I wish I had this back when I was a competitive gymnast, because I definitely had a fixed mindset and would have liked to have someone that would have helped me in some of those moments. So Mindset by Carol Dweck is definitely a big one. And one of my favorite books that talks about values and showing up authentically is Presence. That's another great book. I would also say Dare to Lead by Brene Brown is another excellent one as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much. You've given us so much. You've given me a project to do tonight. I'm going to write a list of the things I can control and not control in my own house. And
Love it.
it's going to, the list of what I can't control is going to just, it's going to be huge. I might have one thing that I can control inside of my house. Anyway, appreciate you, your time. Ted, Ernie, thank you so much. This has been another great episode. So appreciate everyone and have a good night.
Thank you.